Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that half your opinions were never really yours. The shows you binged, the candidates you trusted, the products you swear by, carefully nudged into your mind, one image, one headline, one notification at a time. That's propaganda in 2024. It's not just loud war posters screaming buy bonds anymore. It's quiet, personalized persuasion sliding into your feed, wrapped in memes, influencers, and recommended for you videos. In this video, we're going to trace propaganda's evolution from bold, painted posters and crackling radio speeches to invisible algorithms that decide what you see first. We'll unpack the psychological tricks that have barely changed in a century, examine famous historical campaigns, and then map those techniques onto the apps you use every day. By the end, you'll never scroll through your timeline the same way again, and that might be the most powerful defense you have. To understand modern propaganda, we first need a clear definition. Propaganda is not just lies or crude state posters. It's any systematic effort to shape perceptions, manipulate emotions, and direct behavior toward a specific agenda, often by hiding who's behind it or what's being left out. Throughout this video, we'll move across time, classic war posters, radio and television, then forward into social media feeds and recommendation algorithms. We'll look at how the techniques stayed eerily similar even as the delivery systems changed completely. We'll also talk about why highly educated people aren't immune, and how entertainment, news, and advertising all blur together into one persuasive stream. If you're interested in staying in control of your own thinking, stick around to the end. We'll cover practical defenses, and if you find this kind of deep dive valuable, consider subscribing and turning on the bell so you don't miss future breakdowns like this. Let's start in the early 20th century, when the word propaganda became infamous. During World War I, governments realized they couldn't rely on force alone. They needed to manufacture consent. In Britain, the famous Wellington House churned out posters, pamphlets, and news stories designed to demonize the enemy and glorify sacrifice. In the United States, the Committee on Public Information hired artists, filmmakers, and speakers to sell the war like a product. The key shift was recognizing that mass emotions could be engineered, not just influenced. Colorful posters appealed to guilt and heroism, images of women and children in danger, soldiers calling from the front, slogans like, "I want you." These were early laboratories for large-scale persuasion, testing which images spread fastest, which slogans stuck, and how to turn complex politics into simple emotional choices. Us or them, loyalty or betrayal, courage or cowardice. After World War I, a new industry emerged, public relations. One of its key architects was Edward Bernays, often called the father of PR and a nephew of Sigmund Freud. Bernays believed that democracy required the engineering of consent, guiding the masses by subtly shaping their desires rather than openly commanding them. He helped popularize smoking among women by branding cigarettes as torches of freedom, linking a product to the powerful symbolism of independence and rebellion. That's classic propaganda, tying a private agenda to big emotional narratives. Instead of saying, "Buy this," you plant the idea, "This is who you are." Bernays showed corporations and governments how to use psychology, news media, and staged events to mold public opinion. What matters here is continuity. The same emotional levers, status, fear, belonging, freedom, are still being pulled today, just with more data and faster delivery systems. Propaganda works because it speaks the brain's native language. Emotion first, reasoning later. Our minds evolved to respond quickly to social threats and rewards, not to carefully analyze every claim. Persuaders exploit several predictable shortcuts. First, authority bias. We tend to trust confident experts, uniforms, and official-looking logos, even when they're unearned. Second, bandwagon effect. If everyone seems to believe something, we feel pressure to align just to avoid social isolation. Third, repetition. Familiar messages feel truer, a phenomenon known as the illusory truth effect. Say it often enough, and it starts to stick. Finally, narrative. We're wired to remember stories better than statistics. especially when there's a clear hero, villain, and conflict. None of these are inherently bad, they're how we navigate the world. But when someone systematically organizes them to bypass your critical thinking, that's propaganda in action. Let's look at classic poster propaganda, because it reveals the visual grammar still used in digital media. War posters used bold colors, especially red for urgency and danger, and blue for trust and stability. Compositions were simple and iconic: a single heroic figure, a menacing enemy, or a crying child, each instantly legible from a distance. Text was short and imperative: enlist, remember, loose lips sink ships. Notice the emotional triggers: pride, fear, guilt, and duty. The posters also relied on in-groups and out-groups: we the brave versus they the monstrous. Fast forward to today and you'll see the same logic in viral thumbnails, political memes, and attention-grabbing banners. Faces with exaggerated expressions, high contrast colors, minimal text, strong moral framing. When you recognize those patterns, you stop being just a target and start becoming an observer of the techniques being used on you. Radio and television took propaganda beyond images, adding voice, music, and pacing. In Nazi Germany, cheap radios called people's receivers brought carefully scripted speeches directly into homes. Tone, timing, and crowd noise created powerful emotional atmospheres. Later, during the Cold War, both the US and the Soviet Union used newsreels, documentaries, and entertainment shows to sell their competing visions of freedom and prosperity. Television added another layer: parasocial relationships. Viewers felt they knew anchors, talk show hosts, and recurring characters, so their messages carried extra trust. Advertising and political messaging blurred together between sitcoms and sports events. The point isn't that everything on TV was propaganda, but that the infrastructure allowed a few gatekeepers to broadcast to millions at once. Whoever controlled those channels could set the agenda of what people talked about, and just as importantly, what they never heard at all. The internet promised to break the old gatekeepers. Suddenly, anyone could publish anything. For a while, that felt liberating. But as platforms grew, a new kind of gatekeeper emerged: algorithms. Instead of a TV executive deciding what reaches millions, recommendation systems curate personalized streams for each of us. Their goal isn't political, it's engagement, keeping you on the platform. But that goal has political side effects. Content that triggers strong emotions, anger, outrage, moral disgust, tribal loyalty, tends to perform better. So the system quietly boosts whatever keeps you hooked, whether or not it's accurate, healthy, or nuanced. This creates what researchers call attention propaganda: messages optimized not just to persuade, but to spread. The key shift is scale and speed. A clever slogan or striking image can now reach millions in hours, then be automatically iterated based on real-time metrics, like a lab experiment running on society itself. To see how propaganda and algorithms intersect, think about how your For You or home feed learns your tastes. Every like, watch, comment, or pause is a data point. Over time, the system builds a model: your fears, beliefs, desires. That profile becomes fertile ground for micro-targeted persuasion. Political campaigns, advertisers, and interest groups can serve different messages to different slices of the population. One group gets fear-based crime ads, another gets hopeful economic promises, another gets identity-focused cultural messages. Each version feels organic, like it's simply speaking your language. But you never see what other groups are shown, so it's hard to compare narratives. This fragmentation makes public debate harder. We're not just disagreeing about answers, but starting from entirely different realities. The architecture of personalization, designed for convenience, becomes a perfect vehicle for tailored propaganda that's harder to detect and easier to believe. Modern propaganda isn't always obviously political. Memes, influencer rants, even relatable skits can carry ideological payloads. A meme might oversimplify a complex issue into a single mocking image, encouraging you to laugh first and question later. Influencers may present "just my opinion," but their sponsorships, networks, or undisclosed affiliations can align them with specific agendas. Hashtags and challenges can be used to normalize certain viewpoints or stigmatize others. What's new here is the feeling of authenticity. Unlike stiff government posters, today's propaganda wears hoodies, speaks slang, and cracks jokes. It thrives on irony and plausible deniability. Relax, it's just a meme. But repeated over time, these fragments shape what feels normal, who seems ridiculous, and which positions feel socially dangerous to hold. If you've ever bitten your tongue online to avoid a pile-on, you've felt the soft pressure of mimetic propaganda at work. Another powerful layer is bots and coordinated campaigns. Not every account you see online is a real person. Networks of automated or semi-automated profiles can amplify certain hashtags, attack critics, or flood threads with repetitive talking points. Their goal isn't always to convince you of a specific stance. Sometimes it's just to create the illusion of consensus or controversy. If you think everyone is saying something, you're more likely to take it seriously, or at least less likely to oppose it. These operations can be run by states, political groups, corporations, or even solo actors using cheap tools. They exploit the metrics we instinctively trust: likes, shares, trending lists, comment volume. The more polluted those signals become, the harder it is to distinguish genuine public opinion from manufactured noise. Propaganda isn't just in the content, it's also in the manipulated perception of what other people supposedly believe. So how do you spot propaganda in the algorithmic age? Start by asking 3 questions about any piece of content. Who benefits if I believe this? How does it make me feel? And what am I not being shown? Propaganda usually has a clear directional push. Vote this way, hate those people, buy this solution, fear that threat. It also leans heavily on emotion over evidence. If a post makes you instantly furious, terrified, or smugly superior, treat that as a yellow flag. Look for patterns across multiple posts. Are certain enemies always demonized, certain leaders always heroic, certain solutions never mentioned? Check whether claims are independently verifiable, not just echoed by similar-looking accounts. Most importantly, step outside your feed. Search for disagreements, fact checks, and alternative analyses. The more perspectives you sample, the harder it is for a single propagandistic narrative to fully capture your sense of reality. Protecting yourself isn't about becoming cynical and assuming everything is propaganda. It's about building mental filters and habits. First, slow down your reactions. Algorithms reward instant engagement. You can choose deliberate attention. Wait a few minutes before sharing that outrage bait post. Second, diversify your information diet. Intentionally follow credible sources that disagree with each other and notice where their narratives diverge. Third, separate facts from interpretations. What actually happened versus what someone says it means. Fourth, be aware of your own vulnerabilities, causes you care deeply about, identities you strongly defend, fears that keep you up at night. Those are prime targets for emotional manipulation. Finally, talk to real people offline. Face-to-face conversations make it harder for extreme caricatures to survive. You won't become immune, no one is, but you'll become a much harder target to steer without noticing. Let's pull the threads together. Propaganda is not an artifact of some distant war era. It's a living system that has adapted to every new technology. The core remains the same: shape perceptions, trigger emotions, guide behavior, often without transparent disclosure. Early posters, radio broadcasts, and TV programs laid down the playbook. Simple messages, strong visuals, authority, repetition, and clear in-groups versus out-groups. Algorithms and social platforms didn't replace that logic. They turbocharged it, making persuasion more personalized, faster, and harder to see as coordinated. Modern propaganda flows through memes, influencers, recommendation feeds, bots, and micro-targeted ads, all tuned to what keeps you engaged. Your best defense isn't paranoia, but awareness, noticing emotional hooks, questioning who benefits, and intentionally broadening your sources. When you can name the techniques being used on you, they lose much of their hidden power. That's the first real step toward mental self-defense. If this breakdown changed the way you see your feed, don't let it stop here. Use what you've learned today the next time a headline makes your blood boil or a meme feels a little too perfectly targeted. Pause, ask who benefits, and look for what's missing. If you want to keep sharpening that kind of media X-ray vision, this channel is built for you. We dive deep into the psychology, history, and technology behind how ideas spread and how minds are steered. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and consider sharing this video with one person who spends a lot of time online. In the comments, tell me about a time you realized you'd fallen for propaganda. What tipped you off? Your story might help someone else wake up too. Thanks for watching, and remember, attention is your most valuable asset. Spend it on purpose.